The mountain had taught Elias how to live alone long before loneliness learned his name. And by the time the winter of his 52nd year arrived, silence had become his only companion. The kind that didn't ask questions or judge the scars carved into a man's soul. Because Elias had never had a wife, never had children, never even had a reason to return home early from the forest. And when people in the nearby valley spoke of him, they spoke in half-sentences and lowered voices, calling him the lonely mountain man, the one who fixed broken fences without being asked and vanished before sunrise, the one who brought firewood to widows but never stayed long enough to be thanked, the one who lived in a hand-built cabin, where snow piled against the walls like it was trying to get inside and understand him. And Elias never corrected anyone because some truths didn't need defending, especially the truth that he had chosen solitude not because he hated people, but because he had loved, once and lost so completely that the idea of loving again felt like tearing open a wound that had barely learned how to scar. And yet on the coldest night of that winter, when the wind screamed like a living thing and the trees bent as if bowing to an unseen force, fate knocked on his door in the form of two abandoned widows who had nowhere else to go. And when Elias opened the door, lantern light spilling into the storm, he saw not danger, but desperation written across two faces that had known loss too. Deeply to cry anymore, one older, her hair streaked with early silver and her eyes heavy with years of grief. The other younger, clutching a thin shawl around her shoulders. Fear and exhaustion trembling through her like a fragile flame. And for a long moment none of them spoke, because sometimes pain recognizes pain without words. And when Elias finally broke the silence, his voice rough from years of disuse, all he said was, "You shouldn't be out here." And the older woman swallowed hard before answering. "We didn't have a choice, and that was all it took." Because Elias knew that sentence well, had lived it, breathed it, survived it, and without another question he stepped aside, letting them into the warmth of his cabin, unaware that in doing so he was letting life back into a heart he had buried beneath years of snow and silence. And as the door shut behind them, the storm raged on outside, but something inside Elias shifted, something long frozen beginning ever so slightly to thaw, as he watched the women sit near the fire, their hands trembling as they warmed themselves, and he noticed details he hadn't expected to care about, the way the younger widow's boots were worn through at the soles, the way the older woman kept glancing at her protectively, like a mother guarding the last piece of her world. And when Elias offered them stew without ceremony, the younger one's eyes filled with tears at the simple kindness, forcing her to look away, and Elias felt an ache in his chest he hadn't felt in decades, not sharp, but deep. The ache of a man realizing that being alone had kept him safe, but it had also kept him empty. And as the night stretched on and the fire crackled low, the widows spoke little, sharing only what was necessary, that their husbands had died years apart, that the village they once called home had turned cold and cruel when they could no longer offer anything in return, that shelter had become a favor too expensive for grief-stricken women to afford. And Elias listened without interrupting, without pity, because pity was heavy and he knew how hard it was to carry. And instead he offered them the small room beside his own, blankets freshly aired, a door that could close, privacy he knew they desperately needed. And when the older widow hesitated, asking quietly, "Why are you helping us?" Elias stared into the fire for a long moment before answering honestly, "Because once, a long time ago, someone helped me when I didn't deserve it." And he said nothing more, because the rest of the story lived in his eyes, in the way his hands shook slightly when he poured water, in the long pauses between breaths. And that night, as the widows slept under his roof, Elias sat awake, listening to the wind batter the cabin, wondering how two strangers had managed to walk into his life and make the silence feel louder than ever before. And if you're listening to this story and feel that pull in your chest, that quiet curiosity about what happens when broken lives collide, Then stay with us, because some stories aren't just told, they're lived. And this one has only just begun.